And welcome everyone to the Beautiful Butterfly Show. I'm your host, B.Fly. I want to say happy Thursday to you guys out there. Hope that you're having a fantastic week. I know I am because it's actually cooling off here in North Carolina, and I'm just thankful because I've been roasting because this heat, humidity has had B.Fly out of control. But nevertheless, I am glad that you guys are joining us back for another episode of the Beautiful Butterfly Show. And this evening, we're in store for a treat. Tonight, we're going to be talking about some favorite topics that are near and dear to my heart. We're going to talk about motherhood, marriage, relationships with parents, kids, all of those great things. And so tonight, we got Taylor Rysdon joining us this evening, you guys. She is a mom, wife, and also a vegan influencer. She's actually encouraged me to try some new things as well. And so I'm excited about having her on the show tonight. And as always, you guys don't forget to share. Make sure you share the show, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all those great things. And come and hang out with us in the chat room as well. And you can speak and ask questions to our guests of the evening and all of those great things. And so we're not going to delay. I'm going to bring the special guest of the hour on here. Taylor, are you there?
Hi, yes. Can you hear me?
I can.
Perfect.
How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much. I'm really, really happy to be here. So thank you, Miss Fly, for just having me on. I love your show and what you're doing, so I appreciate it. How are you?
Thank you. I am doing super. As I said, I'm doing even better since the weather has cooled down. It's been like super humid here in North Carolina, and so it's finally cooling down, and I'm just super excited about that.
I'm happy for you. I have a friend who lives in South Carolina, and she said it was like 117 degrees. I'm like, that is not
like crazy. But I'm glad that you were able to join me this evening and all those great things. And so for the folks out here, this may be their first time seeing your face, hearing your voice. Tell them a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. Yes. So my name is Taylor Rysdon, and I was really impressed that you said my last name right, because since being married, everyone always butchers my last name. Before being married, I was Taylor Thomas, and it was so easy. So thank you for getting that right. But yeah, so I think you had a wonderful introduction. I am a mom and a wife of two boys, so I like to consider myself a boy mom. I've actually been in the vegan space. My husband and I went vegan last November. And so it's been a big transition, but I'd like to say my big focuses are around educating others about the vegan lifestyle. I think it's something that I found in adulthood, and I didn't really know too much about it before last November when we decided to choose the vegan walk. And then my other focus areas are just around inspiring other people to live out their passions, specifically women. That is my audience. Majority of my audience is women. So I try to spend a lot of time on my Instagram just inspiring people to choose healthier lifestyles, both physically, mentally, emotionally, and financially too. I haven't even dove into the financial component, but yeah,
absolutely. What was it about the vegan lifestyle that intrigued you and made you want to get, and dig more and deep and kind of change the way that whole eat?
Exactly. No, that's a great question. I would say like I said, I didn't know anything about the vegan lifestyle before going vegan. I loved meat. I ate a lot of cheese, lots of dairy, lots of meat. I loved food, and I still do love food. I think that's the thing that sometimes people miss. It's like, okay, so you're vegan, so now you're just eating trees all the time, right? And it's like, no, I'm still eating good. Let's be real.
Right.
But yeah, my husband and I, we were just laying in front of the couch, actually, we were laying on the couch in front of the TV, and we had just finished eating an entire pizza. I live in Cincinnati, Ohio, and we have this great place called La Rosa's Pizza. And their pizza, I'm not going to lie, it's fire. Their sausage, I mean, I'm not going to tell you guys that the pizza wasn't good, because it was great. We ate a whole pizza and everything else, wings. I mean, meat and cheese galore.
Yeah.
And so we had watched tons of, my sister-in-law had told me about this show, What the Health, and we had pretty much watched everything on Netflix, especially during
Yeah.
the end of the pandemic. Well, not the end, we know it's hitting a restart, but
Yeah.
we had watched everything on Netflix and we're like, man, what are we going to watch? And I said, well, remember Stella told us we should watch What the Health. And so it's on Netflix. We watched What the
Yeah.
Health, and that's one of those documentaries that everybody talks about, but a lot of people never really quite get to watching it. And so
Right.
we're sitting there finishing up our pizza and watching about the mainstream farming industry and where our meat and our dairy comes from. And that
Right.
was honestly the game changer for us. And John's like in a food coma. He's like falling asleep on the couch from eating so much pizza. I'm getting tired, but I stayed up and I just kept my eyes glued on
Yeah.
the screen, and I saw how horrible the animals were treated. And I like nudged him and I said, we're going vegan. And he looked
Yeah.
at me and he's like, oh gosh, because he's so used to like my crazy adventures since being married. So that was honestly nothing intrigued us about it. I'll be honest. Nothing
Yeah.
about it was intriguing. I didn't know anything about going vegan before actually
Right.
going vegan. I had tried like pescatarian, where you still can eat
Mhm.
fish, but you just don't eat a lot of dairy products. I had tried that
Right.
before, but I still, again, didn't know much about veganism until watching that documentary on Netflix, What the Health, and it changed our life. So
Yeah. Absolutely. And one of the things about vegan, I actually went vegan. I was a vegan for 8 years.
wow.
And a lot, yeah. And so it was very interesting for me. And I actually did it as a challenge. One of my friends was on Facebook and she said, I want people to do meatless for a weekend. And so I said, okay, I can do this. So I did it and I just kept going and I didn't eat
Wow.
meat. So when I had my daughter, when I was pregnant with my daughter, everybody kept saying, you need to give that baby some meat. You need to give that baby some meat. And I'm like, no, she's fine. I'm not starving myself to death. And one of the things that I learned specifically in the Black community is that people think like, okay, you're just sitting around eating lettuce, you're
Yep.
not, you're starving yourself, but there's so many great dishes that you can whip up and you feel better.
Yep.
One of my things was I had a lot of stomach issues, like just from eating meat. I never felt good. I didn't have a lot of energy. And so eliminating, things consistently really helped me. And so what are some of the benefits that you and your husband have found from, taking this route?
That's such a good question. And I love that you share the story around just being pregnant with your daughter and everybody
Yeah.
saying, oh, you need to give that baby
Yeah.
some meat. Honestly, that's like, I would say with all of the hormones that are
Yeah.
in dairy, especially, I mean, we're not supposed, it's tricky. It could be
Right.
argued. I'll say it that way because I'm very much convicted in staying vegan. So this
Yeah.
isn't, I love the fact that like it was a challenge for you, and
Yeah.
then you took it and you ran with it because you saw, okay, this is doable and I feel better. And I think that's what I would challenge
Yeah.
everybody else to do. But some of the benefits I've found, honestly, feeling better, absolutely. More energy. I feel once you, everybody says it and it's so cliche, but once you know better, you do better. But I don't
Right.
think that that's necessarily true. Some people know better and they still don't do better because
Right.
it's outside of their comfort zone. So for
Yeah.
me, it has just been, I know better. And I think same for John, like he's talked to family members. It's funny because I had been doing all the research and now I hear him talking to friends like, man, you need to not eat meat. And I'm just like, yes, yes, you're really, he was with me for the ride and supportive of it, but now he really is convicted in it too. So
Right.
now that we know better, we're doing better and we feel better because we know that we're not contributing to cruelty. I think that I thought at first that I was choosing vegan. I knew I felt sad when I watched what was going on with the animals because, they don't have a choice. And I know animals they can't talk to us anyway, but they
Right.
truly, the way that they're treated, the way that they're all caged up into one cage
Yeah.
around each other. And then we think about, this is the number one, my why, right? My biggest why is I see all these animals caged up and they're scared in
Yeah.
this cage. and then they get on the chopping block without being too
Yeah.
painting too much of a picture here.
Yeah.
But then they get on the chopping block and they die for us. And then they make it to the market and we eat them. And we're eating their last moments of fear. We're eating their last moments of being scared. So like when you think about it like that, it's just I can't wrap my mind around eating another mammal that
Yeah.
was, and especially knowing how scared they were. And a lot of people talk about like animals who are living on farms where they can roam freely, how happy they are. But you cannot tell me that animal is not still scared when they're about to die. Like, come on. So for me, I think that's been the number one benefit. I have noticed, I think if I didn't eat so many vegan treats, because I make a lot of vegan treats, I would say I would have probably noticed more weight loss. I have lost weight. I will say that even if you don't lose mass amounts of weight, you see your weight sort of stabilize. So, and I've talked to a lot of friends who eat all the vegan treats and they don't really gain any weight. It's just more so like gaining and losing the same 5 or 10 pounds, to be honest. Your weight sort of stabilizes. Whereas before, I would diet hardcore and like I'm eating just, kale salads and chewing pieces of gum, which is so unhealthy.
Right.
And then the next week I'm eating a whole pizza and I would see myself gaining weight. So now I feel like weight sort of stabilizes. Like I never go past a certain weight. I think I sleep better too. It could be mental. It could just be my brain telling me, okay, you're not contributing. And then the last benefit, sorry, Miss Fly, but I got to say this last thing. The last thing that stands out to me the most, and I'll share a very quick story, and I shared it on an interview that I did a couple of weeks back. Our son, this past Easter, Resurrection Sunday, was our first Easter since going vegan last November. And Jonah's 9, he just turned 9, and we got like the Easter bunny came and brought him a basket filled with toys and other things outside of candy, because it's hard to find like candy that doesn't have milk or eggs in it. So he's going through his basket and he gets to a candy bar, like the one candy bar the Easter bunny was able to find. Okay. So he gets the candy bar and he's like, oh my gosh, mommy, the Easter bunny brought us some candy. And I said, wow. And he flips it over and he reads the label and he says, and it's vegan. He was so happy. But to me, I think when I think about children, they're not reading the labels normally. They just take whatever their parents give them and they eat it. But that told me we're on the right path. If our boys never stay vegan, at least they're reading the fine print.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was like my hope with my daughter. I was hoping to continue on the vegan path. And so at the time we were living in Georgia. And so I was just creating. I didn't even know anything back then about researching online. Even though I was heavily online, I never took the time. I just kind of created my own stuff. I would go to, the farmer's market, different grocery stores, and I would just create stuff. And so my daughter, as she got older, even to this day, she's a huge veggie fan. Like she loves vegetables, and people are always surprised, like, how do you get your kid to eat vegetables? But it's just something that she's been doing since she was little. My mom would give it to her. I would give it to her. And so, but the only person I couldn't change was my husband. He's like, okay, look, I'm in support of you, but I need to have my meat. And I'm like, okay, whatever, So, you pick your battles and whatnot. And so now I'm more of, I do chicken and I do fish, but that's pretty much the extent of it. And so I'm hoping to eventually go back to just vegan because I really enjoyed it. I really did. And I even got some family members to try different stuff, which was very exciting. Like my aunt loves it. I make like a vegan spaghetti. She really loves it. Hamburger, vegan hamburgers, all these different things. And so I think the more knowledge and the more that we spread to people, they become more aware and less like, I'm not going to eat that, so.
And we're blessed now too, because I mean, your local grocery store, most grocery stores have at least one vegan item that you could try. Like the Beyond sausage links for breakfast. I'm like, we need to stop buying these because they're still processed, but they're so delicious.
I know. And I wanted to ask you, of course, being married, and starting a family, what was that process like for you? Because I know at first I would see you on the internet and you were actually doing different jobs and in different locations. And so the moment that you became wife, mom, having a baby of your own, how did that change things from the way Taylor normally, did things?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So I would say it definitely changed things. I would
Yeah.
say that, so John and I, our story, a little bit about that story. So we actually met in 2018 and then we got married in, I'm trying to think. No, that's not right. Sorry, I'm all over the place. We met in 2016 when I
Yeah.
moved. No, wait, sorry. It was 2017. Okay, I can't keep up. But we met in 2017. This I'm for sure about this timing. It was August 2017. I had just moved to Ohio like a year before that. And we met at work. We were both vendors at different companies, but met working on the same account, like the same client account. So basically we ended up meeting. We didn't start dating until 2019. And when we started dating at the time, like John was formerly married and had a son.
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually, when we got married in 2019, it was a fast process. We got married January. I was pregnant in March. Yeah, I was pregnant in March. And then I had Grant at the end of 2019 in November and legally adopted Jonah a week before having Grant. So my mom always jokes and says, "You became a mom of two within 2 weeks." Like that's not, and they're not twins, right? That's normally something where you'd become a mom of two because you had twins. So
Right.
our story is definitely a different kind of story. We are a blended family. We are an interracial family. So we're blended in more ways than one. I like to say that because we're blended both racially and with the dynamic of me adopting Jonah. So a lot did change and really quickly. And I think that that's the thing that people miss. Like, even if you're in a standard situation where you meet somebody that you fall in love with and then you all have kids biologically that are yours together, the transition from being a human being on your own to being a human being that's now focused on three other people's feelings and emotions and personalities and needs and desires. I mean, it's a lot. I would say I grew up a lot too. I would have never called myself a selfish person, but I definitely think that I had, like, your thinking changes. And we all know, anybody who's married knows that, like, marriage grows you up and it's holding a mirror up to you.
Absolutely.
My mom and I talk about this all the time. Like, you always, when you're married, it's like you're just looking in a mirror every single day.
Absolutely.
So it's been a journey. I would say the highs, I always try to start with like a high, a low, and then end on a high note. So the high notes, I think, in my life has been how much I've grown and developed as a person, and then watching the kids, and honestly John too, we've all grown together. And I think that's been interesting. Low points are definitely, I thought I was a huge people person, and I am. But I'm also like, get away from me. At the kids especially, like with John, and we always talk about, and I know moms never talk about this, but I am excited for our kids to grow up and become great human beings and have families of their own, and for John and I to have just us. I think that's the one thing that we missed out on, because we did become like a ready-made family, right? Because he had a story before me and I had my own life before him. So we, merging the two lives together, we missed out on a lot of the dating phase, just he and I. So we're always like thinking about beautiful times in the future when our boys are adults and they're doing their own thing. But at the same time, it's fun. Our house is crazy. There's, it's filled with a lot of personality and color. And so that's what I would say. I think it's been a beautiful story.
Absolutely. Talking about being a interracial family, and coming into a relationship with someone who already has a child, what did you learn about yourself, and what is some advice that you can give women out here who may come into these situations where, their partner does have a child, because sometimes people are very skeptical. There's a lot of scary things that people put out there that can happen. What did you learn, and what advice would you give to people coming into a situation with someone who already has a child?
Number one piece of advice would be make sure you actually know what you're signing up for.
Yeah.
Our story has honestly been easier and more difficult. So it's been easier because I've honestly never even met Jonah's biological mother.
Yeah.
She's not in the picture at all.
Yeah.
So that's been, unfortunately, like it's a challenge, I'm sure, for him over time. I think it's going to be something that we really have to unpack more. But It's been a blessing for me because I don't deal with like baby mama drama, and legally I am Jonah's mom. So that's been like the blessing for me. So that's why I say knowing what you're truly signing up for, because there's always, if there's going to be a situation where you sign up for that person and their child, like, what are you really truly saying by moving forward with that relationship? Is it going to be a situation like mine where you legally adopt? Is it going to be a situation where the person is involved? And I mean, you might want to really get to know them before you sign up. But then at the same time, I think there's been some challenges too, because you're also unpacking some of the things that came before you were even in the picture, even in my situation, because she's not in the picture, but I'm still unpacking things that he was taught, things that like Jonah was taught as a baby. So I think that's the number one thing. I also think the other piece of advice is to take your time. And John and I talk about this all the time. Like, I don't think that when we got married, I had the most patience in general. Like, I was not a patient. I've never been obviously, right? I wasn't a patient person because we got married after like 8 months dating. So I would say definitely know your personality, know the situation, and then know who you are. I think I would definitely have worked on my level of patience in general, just to kind of grow a little bit before jumping 100% in. And I still would jump in. I still would 100% sign up for the life that we have. I just think I would have done it. I would have done a little bit more work on me beforehand. And so I think that would be my number one piece of advice. But the funny thing is, I have friends who they've always said, like, I'll never be with somebody who has a child already. And I'm like, girl, and I never said that. And now I know why I never said that. Like, it was never even a thought to me. So I think for all the people who are single, like women who are single, really knowing what you want before you move forward. Like for me, I never was like judgmental of that because we all have a story before. But I do think that I've finally gotten to a place, and I'm still in the place where I'm like, okay, I've always been the person to like think through, like, I want to know all the details. But then once I know all the details, I'm like, oh, those are too many details. So I think you have to know yourself, like know what you're capable of knowing without overthinking things. And then also knowing, like, what do you really want? Because I think for me, I say this all the time, I think I would have still signed up for the life that I have today. I just would have made sure that Taylor was more prepared.
Absolutely.
I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, it definitely did, because I remember even in college meeting a guy who had children, and I was like, oh, like, I don't think because, being so young at that time, I felt like it was just a little too much for me at the time. However, he was a great person. His kids were great. But I say that to say, and it goes back to what you were talking about, is to make sure that you're in that situation because you want to be, because a lot of times, and I have known people to get in relationships with people, develop a relationship with their children, then the relationship is over and the child is left hurting,
picking up the pieces.
They formed this connection with this person, and now that person is no longer in the picture, and it creates some damaging effects mentally and emotionally, for the children. So I definitely agree with making sure that that's what you want to be a part of. If you're going to sign up for it, sign up for it for the long term.
It's true. And I think in our case too, I'll be honest, and I've told my mom this, I'm like, I don't think that I would have been, if it were a different situation and his biological mom was in the picture, I know that for me, that would have probably been the moment where I'd have been like, this is too much, which sounds weird, right? Most people would want that other parent to be in the life. But for me, it was like, okay, this works out perfectly because we
Yeah.
don't have to worry about
Yeah.
the dynamics on that side. We have to worry about it
Right.
from an emotional standpoint
Mhm.
with the child, but we don't have to worry about it from like a passing like I didn't want all that back and forth. And especially with my upbringing, my mom was a single mom, and I just felt like I just think God is really funny. Like for
Yeah.
me, like I tell people this all the time, I believe in God, and I think God is funny the way that he orders certain, how not even orders your steps, but just allows certain things to
Mhm.
happen. Because I think in this case, like my mom was a single parent, John was a single dad before I
Yeah.
came into the picture. So it's just kind of ironic. Like
Yeah.
I would have never seen myself like I would have never seen myself marrying a single dad, but I
Right.
also it was a natural fit. I think that's what I would
Absolutely.
say. It was definitely a natural fit. And I was able to empathize in a different kind of way because my mom was a single parent.
Yeah. Absolutely. And speaking um of things coming around full circle for you. You also have created your own podcast and blogging. And so tell us a little bit about Fueled by Faith. I actually love the title of it. And so tell us a little bit about Fueled by Faith.
Oh, thanks. I didn't even know you knew about it. I mean, I guess you really done your research. So great interviewing. So yeah, so it's kind of it's taking its shape, and I'm realizing that it's taking the
Mhm.
shape that I it was really just something where I was like, I'm staying up late and I get my best ideas sometimes either really early in the morning or
Yeah.
late at night. During the day, I'm kind of like I'm worthless during the day as far as creative thinking because I'm just like it's just too much going on. But in the
Yeah.
morning when the house is quiet and at night when I think when the house is quiet. But yeah, Fueled by Faith, just I was talking with John and I was thinking about how okay, so I was in a relationship before John,
Hmm.
and I there was this theme of like being led by fear-based decision making, and I in that period of my life, like there was just this theme of like making decisions based on fear. And
Hmm.
so then like literally this past January, I was talking with John about just like how my life has transitioned. And I've shared this in like, I think another interview too. I was talking about like, I've been blogging since like 2012.
Hmm.
And I think it was 2012 or 2016. Obviously I'm not good at like remembering dates, history. um, but I had started my blog, The Gift of Mastery, a
Yeah.
while ago. And so I've been blogging probably, yeah, like probably 8 years or so now. And
Hmm.
so The Gift of Mastery was all about Mental Monday, like how we can learn to master ourselves, which that in and of itself tells you how young I was. Like, and
Yeah.
I've always been fairly mature, but I think I was pretty young in my thinking to think that you can master self. I learned through the process of that blog that you really truly can't master yourself. We're
Right.
always on this path of growing. Like we should,
Hmm.
even when we think we've mastered ourselves, we still should continue growing. So the
Yeah.
point of that blog was around like mastering our finances, mastering our mental state, mastering our fitness, all of these things, which is funny because now that's transitioned into the Taylorisms, which is
Yeah.
now my new blog where I'm focused on the Taylorisms is all about the things that make me me. So motherhood, being a wife, inspiring others, and vegan lifestyle, wellness, physical, mental, emotional. So it's similar format, but a lot of the pressure's gone. I'm just showing up
Yeah.
being authentically me, like the Taylorism.
Right.
So that the Taylorism sort of has the spin-off of that is Fueled by Faith, which all ties back into this idea that our decisions are either, and I came up with this quote, I don't even remember. I was probably in like a sad place. But I
Hmm.
came up with this quote after our decisions are either fueled by fear or fueled by faith. And
Hmm.
so it was in that transition period of going from like a fear based, I'm making all of my decisions based off on fear,
Yeah.
to now I'm making all of my decisions through the lens of faith and taking
Right.
risk and taking a chance, but not just, doing things that don't make sense, but more so like if it feels right and I've prayed about it and I'm really sure, I know it's going to be hard down the road because, like I said, marriage, motherhood, it's hard, but
Right.
it definitely was a faith based decision that I
Right.
made. So, Fueled by Faith, I have women that come on who have done the same thing. They've had life experience, they've navigated challenges, but they are now taking steps at leaps of faith
Right.
Whether it's, most of them are in the wellness space or in the vegan lifestyle. But I've had some women who are just posting their stories online, you know, and so
Yeah.
it's a really cool opportunity for me to connect with other women who are letting their lives be led by faith and not through the lens of fear.
Absolutely. And in that time, I was listening, I believe, to your first Fueled by Faith, and you talked about doing the blogging, that you were in kind of a dark space at the time of doing those. And so, how did you find yourself working out of that to kind of where you are now?
That's great. I just had to leave the relationship, to be honest.
Yeah. So that's a
Like
plus.
that's so I think that's the thing. Like people think that significant change is going to come by staying in the
Mhm.
same place.
Right.
Which, I mean, when you're in that place, it makes sense because you're not thinking clearly. But like things aren't going to change unless you change and unless you shift your
Absolutely.
environment. And I'm not trying to tell anybody to leave marriages or,
Right.
cut off
Right.
family members. I'm more so just saying that you have to really assess where you are. I actually posted a quote about this today on Instagram. Like, we have to really assess, okay, what season am I in right now? Am I in a season where I look around and I'm like, okay, my life is fruitful and I'm filled with joy? Or am I, and you're not always going to be filled with joy. Like I was just crying last week about motherhood and how hard marriage and being a mom is, and feeling like you can't quite show up um, perfectly, because I do have a challenge with wanting to be perfect in the areas of my life that I'm
Yeah.
supposed to show up in. I have like expectations of what things should look like.
Absolutely.
And that's something that I've had to work through, because I think once you have a child, you
Yeah.
realize like you leave the house, you have the diaper bag, you've changed them before you left, and then they poop and you get to wherever you're going. I mean, my thinking around expectation has definitely changed because you just have the unexpected always happening. But yeah, I mean,
Absolutely.
how did I get out of the dark place and shift that? By leaving the dark place. And I think
Yeah.
it's going to take, I've heard like my mom and I talk all the time, but we've talked a lot about this. Like in order to see change, you really do have to do something. Like,
Yeah.
and when we go back to like scriptures too, it talks about how God is going to he's going to make it happen for you. I'm not going to quote specific scriptures right now, but
Yeah.
he will provide that increase, and he will sow into you and encourage you, and he will help you to make it happen. But you do have to do something. Like even
Yeah.
Jesus had to go to the cross. Like
Yeah.
he had to physically do something.
Yeah.
So when you think about that, I had to leave that relationship. I had to clean up my life. I bought all new furniture.
Yeah.
And that was one big thing, because at the time, that's one piece of advice that I would give to any person, whether you're grown and you're like super adult, or whether you're like 18 and you're going to college. Like, do not live with your significant other until you're married. That's like my best. And I made that mistake twice. It's like, oh my
So
gosh.
lesson learned.
Lesson learned. You spend a lot of time, money, and energy doing things the wrong way. So just do them right the first time and you'll save yourself the time, money, and energy.
Yeah.
But that's why I say I bought all new furniture, because I was in a relationship where I was living with the person, and that relationship ended and I truly started all over. And I
Mhm.
think for me, that was where that's where things started getting into. It's so ironic though, like thinking about it now, it's like I was on the path then of the gift of mastery and trying to master myself.
Mhm.
But I'm seeing significant blessings and just seeing things really change in my life in a big way
Yeah.
now, because I'm in alignment. Like we have to be in alignment with God. We can't really, and
Right.
if it's not God for you, then you have to truly own your decisions. And I think for
Absolutely.
me, once I went through that shift of like leaving the relationship and then owning the decisions that I made before that moment and all of the decisions to come next, like
Right.
there's a sense of ownership I think we don't take over our lives.
Yeah.
Like we just kind of live and exist, but we have
Yeah.
to own our life and own our decisions. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I wanted to ask you, because I before me and Taylor did this, I was talking to her about would it be okay to talk about the relationships with our parents and
mhm.
parenting. And the reason why I did this is because I've known Taylor's mom longer than I've known Taylor. But I've known her for years, and so she has just just blessed me and my daughter in so many ways with so many encouraging words. And so, and then she always talk about her daughter so highly. And so, a couple months back, you and your mom did an interview, very heart to heart, about some of the things that you experienced growing up in your childhood. And I talked to your mom about this. I said I had so many questions. And see, the thing about is, when you're listening to interviews, like you're trying to, be into it and tell your kid, no, don't eat that,
Exactly.
But I wanted to ask you, because now being a mother, being a wife, what did you take away from how to handle things from your childhood? Because in the interview, your mom talks about her experience on attempting suicide quite a few times growing up. And so I wanted to know, how did that affect your mental state back then? and how did that mold you, kind of into the woman and mother and wife that you are now?
That's a good question. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I had to take my headphones out. So I would say, I think that was two parts. So the first part was, how did it mold me into who I am today?
Yeah.
I think it definitely played a role. And I share a little bit about that during that interview, how I think for me, I think it did a couple of things. The first is, I hate the unexpected. I'm not big on surprises. Like, even with my mom and I, like, if she's like, I got you a gift, I'm like, okay, well, tell me what it is. And she can't hold the water either anyway. So she ends up telling me too. So that's the first thing. I really don't like surprises. I'm big on transparency. I want to know everything. Even with John and I, like, before we got married, I had to know everything about every relationship before, because I don't like surprises.
Yeah.
So, which actually helped, because when women called themselves trying to be like, hey friend, I was like, oh yeah, I know you. so
like, I see you.
That helped, right? That definitely helped. So I think for me, I've always had this need, which is good and bad. I've had this need of wanting to be in control, and then also wanting transparency, which goes kind of hand in hand with wanting to be in control, because you're forcing people to tell you everything.
Right.
And I've had to work through that. I definitely think that's something I've had to work through, because I can't be in control of everything.
Yeah.
And the same goes for having kids. Like, I think that's where I've really had to grow up. Like, I've had to learn with kids, they're going to do whatever they want, even when you tell them, I'm going to get you,
Yeah.
you're in trouble, you're on. Even, I mean, the child could be on punishment and they still will do whatever they want. So you have to, I've learned to relinquish control, and I'm still learning that. Like, even now I have to really learn that. I've also learned how beautiful motherhood is and how hard it is, in the sense that, I mean, my mom was depressed as a mom. And so that has really helped me navigate being a mom. If my mom could be depressed and suffering mental health crises and still show up for me, even though I know that sounds interesting, because she tried to commit suicide. So people could argue, okay, well, how is she being there for you? But she was still great. And even when that moment came, like, for me, I still, when people ask me about my childhood, I'm like, it was great. Like, it almost as if that never happened. Because, and I know part of that could be related to the trauma of me still needing to process it, and I still am processing it. But I think a big part of it was just the fact that my childhood was great. Like, it truly was. I mean, I saw things that were a challenge. I think for me, I never saw how sad my mom was. So that's also made me kind of the friend who's like, are you okay? Well, are you sure you're okay? I just had a friend last week who just had a baby, and I'm like, are you good? And she's like, hey, I'm fine. I'm like, no, but are you fine? Let us send you some food, because like, I can't accept that things are fine. Like, for me, I need to know more. So how has that affected that? Like, even with Jonah, like, I'll ask him, buddy, are you okay? And he's like, yeah, I'm good. I'm like, but are you sure you're okay? He's like, I'm good. I'm like, but are you sure? I probably drive everybody a little crazy in the house, but I think overall it has made me realize, I mean, I struggled with, especially as a teenager, like, well, things aren't fair. Like, that whole concept of one of my core values, I'm realizing this now, I have like a career coach, because I still work in corporate America. And so my career coach, we were just talking, and she's like, it sounds like you really value fairness. And I'm realizing that I do think that that comes from childhood stuff. Just for me, things have to be fair. And for maybe on some level, the childhood Taylor felt like it was unfair that my dad wasn't in my life. It was unfair that my mom had an attempted suicide. It was certain things were unfair. And I do think that that's where that comes from. But now I'm learning, like, okay, things aren't going to be fair. Like, that's just part of life. And if control what you can control and make things fair where you can. And now the other thing I'll say is some of the stuff I put my mom through in those teenage years, I'm like, oh, sweet baby Jesus, please let my son not do this wrong. You know, like, I have a different level of empathy for her, I would say. And John and I talk about this all the time. Like, I view my mom in a totally different lens. Like, I always knew she was great then, but like, I always thought, oh, my mom's so strict. And now as an adult, I would say that I am like, you can't breathe without me. So it's just kind of ironic that, like, I went from thinking, oh, I'm going to be, my mom used to always call me kind of like a hippie as a child because I loved like wearing big flowers. And, you know, I was always like, I'm going to let my kids just gallop through the meadows, you know? And now I'm like, you need to sit right here for the next 32 minutes and 56 seconds. And then I want you to do that. You know, I'm a little more strict than I think I thought. But I also think I have so much more empathy for my mom and for moms everywhere after seeing how hard motherhood is. Because you don't, I mean, even without mental health challenges, I feel like it's hard. So imagine putting mental health issues on top of that. I couldn't imagine. So I know that's long.
No, you're fine. And speaking of mental health and having a mom who is an advocate about mental health, and hearing some of the things that she went through your childhood, and I heard you talk about the importance of checking in with people, and I'm a huge fan of checking in. Like, I'm always doing something,
You are
and
really good
I
at that.
take the time.
You are.
But I take the time to check in because I think so many of us get caught up in just the hustle and bustle of life, you know, and just for somebody to take a few seconds to say, hey, how are you? You good? You know, even when I was sick, you know, you and I were conversating and you were like, oh my gosh, are you okay? Do you need to go to the hospital? I'm like, I've already been. I got my meds, you know. But Taylor was like, you okay? You need to.
Well, you need a meal.
But I appreciated that because it's the check-in factor of people wanting to actually know what's going on with you. Not, you know, what do I need from you? Can I, you know, all this, just what's going on with you. And so being a big advocate of checking in with people is always a big thing to me, and I love that you do that with your friends because I'm that way too. You know, if you're sick, like, what do I need to bring you? You know, like, are you going to the hospital? Have you got your antibiotics? You know, and so it's so important. And so, and speaking of mental health, as far as when it comes to your own children, how do you go about checking in with your own kids, especially Jonah being your oldest, you know, to make sure that he's okay? Because I know during this pandemic, children experienced a lot, you know, not being able to go to school in some places. And so I was a huge advocate of every day, and even now, asking my daughter, how are you? Like, how are you? Like, you know, like, really, you know, how are you feeling? And so how do you guys kind of check in with him to check on his emotional and mental?
That's great. No, so during the pandemic, he actually was in school for much of that time.
Okay.
So we bought a house like in July.
Okay.
Before that, he was out for 2 months. We bought a house and then he started at a new school. So we already had all that change. I think getting ahead of it was our big thing. So when he started at the new school, we actually ended up reaching out to the counselor and his teacher just to give them his backstory, but also with the pandemic, making sure we were all in the loop. I think parents aren't as involved, unfortunately, at the school level, because we're around our kids all the time, but like, what's going on at school? Like, okay, I don't want to, and I told one of his counselors, John and I had this conversation, not with his counselor, with his teacher, when we had the final parent teacher conference. She had mentioned like something, it was something so like minuscule, but it annoyed me because she shared how, I don't know, it was like him getting chatty during certain time period, you know, between the shift of walking to put away his books or something.
Yeah.
And I told her, I said, you know, when we started at the beginning of the school year, John and I let you know that we wanted to be involved. If he's getting chatty, I don't care if it's small or if it's big. We want to know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like, I don't want to, and we looked at her and I said, I'm like, I don't want to hear about this when it's the end of the school year. I wanted to hear about this. When did this happen? And she's like, oh, you know, it's just every once in a while. It's not a big deal. And I think that's where, especially again, being a blended family, but we have boys who are going to show up in the world as Black.
Yeah.
Don't tell me it's not a big deal, because that could be the difference between them going and being chatty with a police officer, right? And then now they're one of the ones that we're out, you know, marching for. So don't tell me it's not a big deal. Like, we take education in our family seriously. And if you're not used to that, well, then I'm sorry, but this is where we stand. Actually, I'm not sorry, but this is where we stand. Education is important. So you let us know if he's falling behind.
Yeah.
So I think that's the number one thing, parents being involved at the school level as well. And then the second thing is just, I mean, we're always talking about, honestly, Coach Michelle, if it wasn't a big deal, she wouldn't have mentioned it. Exactly. Right. It's obviously a big deal. So you should have been telling us this. So I think getting super involved. Also, John takes Jonah, and I give him huge credit for this. Every time he goes to work out, he's telling Jonah he needs to go. We did have moments where if Jonah said, oh, I don't really want to go, we'd let him stay home. But now we are definitely like, no, you need to go and sweat. I don't think that kids are mandated the need to sweat nearly as much as they should be. Kids need to get fresh air. And I mean, they're on screens all the time. That's the other thing. So we're not, I think, I'll be honest. John asked Jonah how he's doing more than I do, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think that it's a nice balance, and I'm grateful that he's not in a single parent household, right? Because he gets that balance of like, when I'm being tough, John can be softer. When I'm softer, John can be tough. So John will usually take him to run. There's the sweat, making sure the child sweats, making sure they're eating enough, making sure they're getting enough rest. And then screen time. Like, we really do value screens in moderation. Like, that is like, he doesn't have like access to YouTube, and when he has, we've figured out ways to get rid of it. So I think that's the other thing. I think one thing we did bad, honestly, we're not the perfect parents. One thing that I personally failed at was keeping the news on too much. And now with this new outbreak that we're seeing, we decided not to get the vaccination. I know that there are a lot of people in the Black community who are torn on it, and then there are some Black people who are getting it. For us, we just want a little bit more time. And this isn't like me marketing to not get it. I think you should do what works for your family.
Right.
But because we've decided not to, we've definitely been more cautious about who we're around, when we're around them, what that looks like. Even though I know it sounds silly because he's going to school, but masking up and praying a lot. But with that, I think that's one thing that I'm going to keep in mind. And I'm realizing it real time while I'm talking to you. I had the news on all the time. And Jonah, I mean, to the point, Jonah was like, this just in. He was walking around pretending to be a newsman. He's like, the COVID-19, vaccine is now being rolled out across the United States. And I'm like, Jonah, oh my God. So that made me realize, like, okay, turn the news off, turn off the noise. Because your kids are hearing it too. So how do we check in with him? It's a lot of making sure he's sweating, making sure he's eating well, making sure he's getting rest. And then I could probably do better at just turning off the noise.
Yeah. Well, and I totally understand, because I think one of the things also with me in our household as well is that we listen to the news a lot. And so I think hindsight, I probably would have lessened that. But because it also creates like a
fear-based living.
Yeah. So when my daughter, they went totally virtual for a while. And so we kind of talked to her about, how do you feel about going back to school when they talked about going back? And she said, Mama, I don't want to get COVID. I don't, so because on the news, you're hearing all these huge numbers of people that are dying and, on ventilators and all these different things. And so in my mind, I guess I wasn't thinking she's soaking this up. They're like a sponge.
Yeah.
She's 7, she just soaks it up. So I even have to be careful. Like when I'm on the phone with one of my girlfriends, like, okay, go to the bathroom. But and so we have to be careful, like what our kids take in, because sometimes it can create a fear. And even for us as adults, if I listen to the news too much, I find myself getting very anxious, very nervous, just
and that's
and
that's the checks and balances too. Like when you're talking to a friend, you can catch yourself saying, oh, I can't go to the grocery store, like overthinking and sounding so fear-based, because there is a lot of no one's spreading the news about the positive things that are happening either. So I think it's, if we're hearing it like that, that they're taking it in, and they're so, like you said, they're a sponge, and they're so almost pure, even though they know things, like they're just such a clean slate. So we have to remember that they're like a canvas, that every time they hear the news, we're painting on that. My mom also put in the chat, and you have family time. Funny enough, we've actually been doing a lot of old movies from my childhood, and I've been crying over the movie Parent Trap with Lindsay Lohan. I'm like, let's watch Parent Trap. Let's watch.
That is my daughter's favorite movie right now. We have watched it so many times, and we even watched the older version.
Oh wow!
Last weekend, and she was like, "Nah. I like the one with Lindsay Lohan," but she's a huge fan of it for some reason. I never thought she would catch on to it. I just kind of played it, and she just kind of loved it.
It's a good movie. I was boo-hooing last night when we watched Parent Trap. Dom was like, "Oh my gosh!" I was just tears everywhere. Jonah's like, "Oh, it's okay, mommy." I'm like, "Oh, the family's together." I was breaking down. I mean, it's ridiculous, but it's cool to go back. I think the one thing, I was sharing this with a friend who's going through a hard time. I'm like, watch some of those old movies, because the stuff that's on TV now, some of it's good, most of it's crap. And so for me, I'm like, watch the old stuff with your kids, because it takes you back to those good feelings that we felt just a few years ago.
Absolutely. And keeping things pure. I think, everything now, I feel, when it comes to kids, is so oversaturated.
With messages.
I even early on, our daughter would get on YouTube. We would let her on her tablet. And, I'm thinking it's harmless for her to watch different little cartoons. And next thing you know, Superman, has Elsa pregnant. And I'm like, wait, what's going on here?
And the ads too.
Yes. And
the ads in between. Oh, that is, if any parents out there are listening, if you think your child is watching Arthur, which, by the way, Arthur's going off of syndication. I'm so sad. There's not going to be any more Arthur. It's been the longest cartoon that's been on.
Wow. And it is going away. I love Arthur.
So run through all those old Arthurs. But if you think your kids are watching Arthur or watching Blue's, I was watching Blue's Clues, and for Pride Month, they were talking about how inner I can't even think of the word, but same-sex relationships on Blue's Clues. And I know that that's the world that we're living in, but at the same time, I don't want my 20-month-old learning about same-sex marriage. I don't want our 9-year-old learning about same-sex marriage at this age. They're just too young. They're gonna see it. It's gonna happen. And I know that's not what this is about. I'm more so just saying that we can love people without teaching our kids some of these things so young. They have so much time to learn that.
And if topics are going to be discussed, you prefer it come from you. You and your husband versus, and that's our thing too. We rather, our daughter come to us to talk about things and discuss things versus anybody else telling her about stuff. And she's around a pretty diverse group at school, and so she definitely is aware of certain stuff, even at a young age. But we have those conversations because we want to be able to talk to her about those things, not anybody else giving her, the wrong information or what have you.
And that's the biggest thing. I think the talk has always been a talk that parents had with their kids, and now it's anything kind of goes. And I think that's the biggest thing. Why have parents lost their opportunity to reach their children first?
Yeah.
So I think that's just, I don't know. I think if you think your kids are just watching Blue's Clues, just be cautious because
Yeah.
the ads in between are showing,
Yes.
like, I mean, Jonah was with like a grandparent, and he was watching something and we both saw it. Me and the grandmother were both like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
The ad was like this cartoon looking character with her breast all
Yeah.
pumped out. And I'm like,
Yep.
he's 9.
Yeah.
This isn't okay.
Yes.
He's
Yes.
9. Like,
I
why is
totally
this
get
the
it.
ad that you're seeing?
Yeah.
No.
I totally get it. But I definitely agree, and as Carrie Anderson in the chat room said, communication is key. Being able to talk openly and honestly with our children about things, and making sure, they're getting the proper information that they need. And so I wanted to ask you, at the end of the day, on your blog, you're encouraging folks, and even doing your vegan, which Taylor just made these vegan brownies, and so now
They're so good.
this weekend, I'm gonna try to whip up these brownies.
Oh,
and see,
please do.
what
Tell
I
me how
can
you
do.
like them, please. I need somebody outside of our house. My mom is always cracking jokes like, yeah, I know how much John loves you. I know how much Jonah. She's like, let me talk to Jonah. I know Jonah will tell the truth to me. But truly, honestly, though, for real, like when my mom came, I was so proud of her for trying she tried pretty much everything I made. And some things she's like, I don't know about that. But most things I was excited to see her say, like, that was actually really good.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah.
So please try the brownies and let me know if you like
I
them. Anybody out there,
I definitely will. And so I wanted to ask you, in those moments, because I know being a wife, being a mother, and also trying to, hold down your career, it takes balance. And so how does Taylor stay motivated? How do you maintain that balance for your own sanity, on a day-to-day basis?
So it's funny you're asking this because I'm actually in the middle of figuring that out. I don't think, things are always, I haven't been able to fit. I'm super organized. I just bought a planner, actually. I have it here. My little giraffe planner. I got it from TJ Maxx. Shout out to TJ Maxx.
I just bought one too.
And this is a plain one because I just want to be able to have the months, right?
Yeah.
So I would say for me, honestly, the biggest thing that I've been focused on is just knowing that something's going to falter. Like being open to knowing like, okay, something is not going to get done. And that's okay. Because before I used to be so focused on like everything needs to get done. I would go to bed at 2 a.m. if it meant my to-do list was checked off and end up super exhausted.
Yeah.
So for me now, I'm like, okay, something isn't going to get done. That's okay. And I have to accept that.
Yeah.
But I think I'm in two places in my mind because I'm thinking about like what people would want to know versus like what. So right now I'm coming off of a knee injury, really bad knee injury. I ended up going to get surgery for the knee injury 2 weeks ago. I had torn my patella femoral inside my knee, which most people don't know what that is, but it's basically a ligament in your knee, and it tore. I had just started a workout and I heard this loud crack. I fell to the ground and John came to the rescue. It was a beautiful Cinderella story, but without the glass slipper because my knee didn't work, and it still is coming. I'm like in the rehabilitation phase of that. Yeah. I say all that to say I think my life was definitely out of balance before. So like I said, I shared the story of John being a single dad. He was doing everything. He was cooking, he was cleaning, he was taking care of Jonah, he was getting him to the child care. He was doing everything. I came into the picture and I saw, again, through the lens of having a single parent, my mom did everything. I'm thinking, I'm superwoman. Just like if my mom could do it, I can do it. So I came into the relationship like, I'm going to do everything. I got it. I'm going to schedule, I'm going to get Jonah registered for school, and we're going to have first day of school pictures, and I'm going to do all these things. And that was in the dating phase. Then we got married and I took it to a whole nother level. So everything was everything, and it all had to be perfect. Right. And so John was always like, I got it. And I'm like, no, I got it. I got it. Please just let me do it. Because I think for me, I identified productivity with I am worthy, right? Like if I'm productive, then I'm worthy of the life that I have. If I'm productive, then I'm worthy of being considered a good wife. If I'm productive, then I'm good enough. And so I've realized, and I've always been high performing anyway, just by nature. Like my mom tells everybody when I was like 5 years old, I had a planner and I'd write down, Mommy, what's the schedule for today? So that's always kind of been me, and I thrive there. But I'm realizing I don't thrive in being overproductive and completely exhausted either. I end up being like a tyrant mom, a tyrant wife. I hate everybody. Like that's just me being honest. Like there's this reel right now that's viral on on Instagram of like a mom who's like dancing and she's loving this song, and she walks into her kitchen and then she sees there's dishes and she just starts cursing and she's like, I hate this house. She goes from like, you know, loving, and I think there's that switch. Like a lot of moms do live in that place where it's like, yay, I love you guys. Oh, I hate my whole family, because you're just so exhausted that you can't really be in a space of gratitude. So for me, this knee injury has literally forced me to physically sit down. I can't do anything. So I've had to grow up, honestly. And John's like, I've been here this whole time. Like maybe I could have done a better job of telling you, woman, sit down. He's like, I could have probably done a better job of that, but I've always been here. I've always been, and he's always been helping along the way. But I've just always been like, I have to be in the driver's seat. This has to get done. That has to get done. And now I told him, we looked at each other earlier today because it's been rough, you know, it's been hard for me. It's been emotional for me. And I think for him too, it's been exhausting on both sides. Me seeing him doing all the things that I was doing before, and he's trying to hold up the standard of what Taylor, you know, how mommy does it. Yeah. And so it's been interesting, but now we're at the tail end. I go back to work next week. I'm starting to move around more. I'm baking again. And so we're at the tail end of it. And we looked at each other earlier and I was like, I can do it. I can do it. And he's like, we're not going back there. No. Yeah. Like he looked at me and he's like, no. And he's like, you can sit down, sit at the table, be creative, have fun. I'll make the boys lunch. I'll do this. I'll clean. I'll do all the laundry. Like I haven't done laundry in 2 months. And I was doing laundry every day. And it was like, and of course I'd say to John, you know, hey, can you go grab this? And he'd be like, yeah, whatever, I got it, you know, but now it's different. Now he's like, no, you sit down and you create a reel. No, you sit down and answer those 15, you know, messages you have from people asking about vegan life. And I've been so productive and just on fire. And so I think there's a place in the middle that we can live, right? Where you can do both, where you can be productive, but still not end up saying, I hate my life. Because you're doing too much.
Because I think it's so, well, I don't think I know it's pretty hard to not get overwhelmed and going to bed. Like you said, everybody else is asleep, you're still up. And I don't know about you, even there are moments where at night I'm in the bed, my brain is still like turning like, oh, did I do such and such? Did I, you know? And so I've learned now, even when, especially when I was sick for so long, to turn it off, you know, because at the end of the day, all you are is one person, you know. And so if we keep giving so much of ourselves to everything and everyone, we won't have anything left. We don't have the energy to be productive in the ways that we want to. And it's okay some days is to say, you know what, I'm not doing anything today, you know, even if you know that it's gonna pile up the next day, you know, but it's okay, you know. And I'm learning that myself. And so I'm glad that, you know, you have learned some life lessons through that, even though you had to hurt your knee, which you know, but, you know, we're glad that you learned some things through that process. And so at the end of the day, with Taylorism, your blogs, vegan lifestyle, what is it your hope and your desire that when people, you know, tune into your blogs, go to your Instagram, read your recipes, what do you want them to be able to take away from all of that?
I love that. That's such a good question. I might have to add that to my list and give you a shout out. I think the ultimate takeaway, honestly, is I like to say I've been thinking a lot about my why lately and tweaking it. My why is truly to get people to a place, encourage women specifically. That's my focus, is to encourage women to go from focusing so much on the areas of our life that we want to change and truly get to a place where we can use it as the fuel that gets us to a spot where we can make faith-based decisions, and live and lead more productive and fulfilling lives. So the thing that's often our area where we're like, I need to change this about myself, like me for instance, I shared with you being controlling and like wanting to have control and wanting people to be
Right.
transparent. Like that's beautiful, but why don't I take that and let that fuel my goals online and like encouraging other people? So
Right.
ultimately that's what I want the takeaway to be. Like if I can do it, so can you. And just take whatever that area is that you're trying to tweak about yourself and let it be the fuel that helps you live out your passions. So
Absolutely, absolutely love it. And so, what advice would you have for the one young woman out here getting into a relationship, getting ready to get married, becoming a mom, all of these great things? What would be your piece of advice about everything just coming together?
everything coming together is not going to look like everything coming together.
Right.
And be open to that, because I think that's the secret sauce of life is like
Yeah.
those growing pains. And I go through it too. Like John and I really love each other, but I had a friend who tell me like love is never going to be enough. And when
Right.
she said that, because she actually was married and got a divorce, and she's like, what happens when love isn't enough? Because for her, she went through that. Like marriage is not just about loving your partner. Being a mom is not just about loving your kids.
Absolutely.
Living in your passions isn't just about loving your passions. In all
Mhm.
three of those areas, you have to do something. Like you have to grow up. You have
Mhm.
to be willing to sacrifice, and you also have to be willing to hold other people accountable. You have to have values. Like that's the biggest thing for me is like, what are my core values? How do I live those out? And obviously being married, like John and I have focused on creating our values together now. Like we were two whole people before we became one. So
Right.
that's and even once you become one, you're still two whole people that are now one. So how does that look? Like what are my core values? What are his core values? And then what are our core values? So that's been the thing that I think we've had to learn in marriage. And the same goes for motherhood. Like my kids' core values are going to look very different from my core values as a mom. But if
Right.
I'm raising them right, they will be able to respect my core values, which are also their rules.
Right. Right.
And then they'll also build their core values based on what I'm showing them, because I'm living that example for them. I'm a human example of that. So I think that's the biggest thing is like really identify what your core values are before you say I do. And then make sure that you're communicating those core values, and then talk to your partner. How did they feel about your core values? Because you can have two driven people that come together and drive each other crazy
Right.
because they're
Absolutely.
both so driven and they're both so focused on who they are that they're
Right.
not willing to become one. And I think that's the one thing, like John and I, again, love each other so much. But the thing we've really had to learn is like, okay, we are two individuals who came together now. And it's beautiful to want to, because we're both like, okay, I'll do this for you. And he's like, I'll do that for you. But like, okay, if we're both willing to do the thing that the other person wants, like, when do we really come together and like create what is going to be like our path forward?
Yeah.
Because then we're constantly accommodating for the other person. So I'm excited about the future because we put in the work.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing is like invest in yourself, invest in your relationship, and invest in your kids. Because and therapy, oh my gosh, therapy has been so good. We started therapy a
Yeah.
couple months back, and it's been really good just for us to come. Sometimes we go into therapy and we just crack jokes with our therapist.
Yeah.
And sometimes we, before therapy, we have like a little mini date in our room with the door closed away from the kids. So we've
Yeah.
made it a fun thing just so that we can find ways to communicate and also ways to just like have a neutral party. And I think that's the thing that so many couples do miss. I think
Right.
even when your marriage is good and when your marriage is bad, I think therapy is so important because it's one of those things. It's like going to the doctor for like an annual wellness visit.
Right.
I actually, funny enough, was somebody that never went to the doctor for an annual wellness check. I hated it. I thought it was a waste of time. But now, since going vegan, you need to do that. It's
Yeah.
maintenance so that you know where you are. Am I getting enough
Right.
nutrients? Like, same thing with your kids. Like, I could go on for days. People, if you want to know more, talk to me. I appreciate you. But I just think, to those of you out there who are thinking about, becoming a mom, becoming a wife, like it takes work and you have to be willing to grow, and you have to be willing to also know that like, make sure you know who you're marrying too. Like the thing I appreciate so much about John is that he truly is willing to grow.
Yeah.
Like I really believe that about him. No matter what it looks like, he could be having an off day, he could be having a great day. Like I know that he wants to grow. And so if you're marrying somebody who's like, I'm never going to change, this is who I am, it's like, okay, bye.
Yeah.
Bye. Like, nope, not for me.
See,
Because
and we had a question. How important is having a therapist that looks like you? Sometimes people want therapists, who looks like them and have been through some things. Did that factor in for you guys when deciding,
That's funny. It's actually really funny because our therapist is actually a white older man, and
Yeah,
we adore him because I mean we just think he's great. And honestly, I don't know that he's gone through, like, he's been with his wife forever, so he
yeah,
hasn't even gone through as much. But again, it goes back to values. How important is a therapist that looks like you? It's the same with anything. What are your core values, and does your therapist values align with yours? Because even before John, I had a therapist, and he was a young white man. Again,
yeah.
I'm a Black woman. Like, most people would say that's not going to work. How will he ever know what you're going through? But his values aligned with mine. And he wasn't even, funny enough, he actually wasn't even a Christian. I don't think,
Yeah.
therapist confidentiality, they really can't share that much about him. But
Mm-hmm.
I could tell that he wasn't a Christian, but I also know that he was able to appreciate the fact that I was a Christian, and he didn't give faith-based advice in that sense. Like, he didn't focus on like God, but he would, if I said something about God in my life, then he would placate to that as well. So it's one of those interesting things. Like, I think you have to find somebody that, when you talk to your therapist, are their values aligned with your values? So how do you feel about, being a therapist of somebody who's a Christian? How do you feel about, like, I asked a lot of those questions, like, and we've asked a lot, like, I asked a lot of those questions for myself, and then we've done the same thing from a marital standpoint.
Absolutely. Absolutely love it. And so for the folks out there who want to hear more from you, they want to get some of these, tell them how they can go about connecting with you, your website, and all those great things.
That's great. Yeah. So if you are a woman, my audience is definitely women. I am very old school. I always tell people this. I might be late 20s, but I'm very much old school. And same thing with John. Like, we're an old school couple. We have old school values in the sense that, like, if a man wants to talk, you can talk to John. If a woman wants to talk, you can talk to me. So we are kind of old school in that way. And I think there's plenty of resources out there. But if you are a woman and you'd like to connect with me, then I'm your people. Feel free to connect with me on Instagram at Taylor M as in Mickey Mouse _Rysdon, Rysdon. I think it's here on the screen. And then also my blog, thetaylorisms.org. I do have, if you're interested in the vegan life, male or female, I have an email list. You can actually go to my blog, and there's a box that'll pop up and say subscribe to the newsletter. If you're on my mailing list, you can also opt into getting the vegan beginners grocery list. So that'll help you figure out, like, what you should be buying when you go to the store if you're interested.
Yeah, which is great, because when you're starting in vegan, I can tell you go in the store and you're looking at stuff like,
you're like, what's good? And you don't want, and the thing is, the vegan stuff and the market is so expensive sometimes, depending on the brand. So, like, I want to save you money. And that's one thing too, in the newsletter that comes out bi-weekly. Usually I'll highlight products too. Like, here's the product we tried this week. I hope you enjoy it. And usually, I promise my taste buds can be trusted. So I won't take you the wrong way. So.
I absolutely love it. And Taylor, it has been a pleasure talking to you this evening about everything under the sun. I think we pretty much covered all areas just about this evening, but I love what you're doing. I love just the positive energy that you are putting out here to yourself. I believe it's needed even more so now. And I have to ask you this question. I've asked all my guests so far this year, with the pandemic going on, things being kind of hectic, what has Taylor learned about herself during this pandemic?
That I'm perfectly happy being in the house.
I love it.
Being honest, I have been really happy with the pandemic keeping us all at home. I've realized that the world is real messed up. And so the safest place to be right now is in your house. I mean, the stuff that's happened during the pandemic, it shows, like, it's been obvious that people are hurting. It's been obvious that our country hasn't come as far as it says it has when it comes to race-related issues, especially with us. Like, we've had tough conversations with family members about racism during this pandemic. So for me, I think I'm perfectly happy being at home, and I feel like this has become, like, more of a safe place than I would have, I already knew that, but I think now that's what I've learned. I'm a people person, but I've also found that like I know who my tribe is too, because that's another big thing. Like,
absolutely,
you can make an impact. I think I'll end on that. You can make an impact wherever you are. And so I think so many people have either turned to social media to make an impact there, or calling friends and family members, or reading more books. Like, you can make an impact, not just in the lives of others, but in your own life. So I really thought about like how much I've grown a lot during the pandemic. I mean, we had a baby right before the pandemic started. So in March, when everybody was falling ill, we're looking at each other like, okay, trusting your gut. Like, I mean, our doctor, we were already very hesitant about the vaccination, regular vaccines for Grant, who's, like I said, 20 months. So he's been a pandemic baby. And when we'd go to the doctor, I canceled all of his doctor's appointments. Most people are like, you got to take the baby when they're 3 months and 4 months and 5 months, all those appointments. I was like, we're not coming back. We'll see you when the pandemic gets better. And the doctor's office was like, but he's going to be behind on his vaccines. Well, he will just be behind on his vaccines and we will be at home and I will feel good. And guess which baby has never had an ear infection? Ours. Guess which baby is too plump when they cook them. I mean, he is just, he's so healthy. He's so healthy. And I'm not saying that that's the case for everybody, because I know that there are people who have had a hard time. I'm not saying that we've just done everything perfect, but you got to trust your gut and you have to believe that if you feel it, go with that. Because for us, that's the Holy Spirit. For you, it might be intuition. I don't know. But for us, like, we felt we need to be keeping our baby at home, and we did. And we did get COVID, funny enough. We got COVID last November, actually, 2 weeks after going vegan. So a lot of people would say, why would you go vegan? Well, I honestly believe, again, we watched What the Health after having sausage pizza. I believe that was for us, God saying, okay, it's time. Because think about it, when you get cheese and dairy in your body, that creates like mucus, which makes it more difficult to breathe. So I'm thankful that we got COVID when we did. And I think it's helped us live with antibodies through this time. Like and I know I sound like I'm just, pooping pixie dust. I worked at Disney. I tell people that, like, I'm so happy I poop pixie dust, but truly, I believe that like everything does happen for a reason. And I think we got COVID when we were supposed to. I think we went vegan when we were supposed to. So if you want to protect yourself during this pandemic, stay away from the meat and the dairy, to be honest, because the meat and the dairy we're only going to see more pandemics. And if you watch What the Health, I'll send you resources. When you connect with me, I'll send you resources. But if you watch some of these things, they talk about how these pandemics keep happening because of these things are happening from animals. Like the animals are getting sick. So just do your research. That's the biggest thing. Do your research, trust your gut, and stay home and enjoy your household.
I absolutely agree. And once again, you guys, make sure you go to Instagram. I got her information down here below. I will also post it on Facebook as well and Instagram, you guys, so you guys can connect with her. Go sign up if you're interested in being a vegan. You need some extra support. Go sign up for her mailing list. Message her. She will be glad to help you. And so once again, thank you so much to everybody who has tuned in this evening with your questions and comments. We truly appreciate it. And to you guys that will watch the replay. And again, Taylor, thank you so much for coming on here. You got any final words or thoughts you want to share with the folks?
Thank you for asking. I just want to thank you for what you're doing as well. I love your radio show. I love what you're doing, and just keep spreading the positivity and having this platform, because I really do appreciate coming on. And I think that everything that you're doing, you're a great interviewer as well. So I appreciate you, and I'm grateful for this opportunity. Thank you again.
I appreciate it. Oh, thank you. I definitely love it. And I definitely will be tuning into you as well. See, you never know who's listening. So, I've been listening. So you never know who's listening. So, but I appreciate you as well. And of course, anytime you want to come back on here, just let me know. And I would love to have you. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your week and a weekend, and get that knee healed up so you can be bouncing around.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. I'll see everyone soon.
You have a good one.
Thanks, you too. Bye, everyone.
Bye. All right, you guys. That was Taylor Rysdon, you guys. Make sure you go check her out. Wife, mother, vegan influencer, all of those great things. And if you did take away anything from tonight, you took away whatever situation you go into, make sure that situation is good for you. Great note to end on. So, with that said, folks, come and join us next Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to have a Michael Taylor. He is an author, speaker, motivator. He's going to be coming on, and we're going to be talking about the stereotypes that the media displays about Black men. So all of my Black men, young men, dads, moms, bring your sons on here, watch us. It's going to be a fantastic show Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on the Beautiful Butterfly Show. And then coming up Thursday, we're going to have another music guest. We're going to have Melody Royale in the building coming up Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we got a lot of great things going on for you guys. And it just happens to be B.Fly's birthday next Thursday. But you guys know I'm celebrating all month. But nevertheless, I appreciate you guys for your support, for your time, and all that you do to make this show great. So with that said, folks, we're going to get ready to get out of here. I am a B.Fly. You guys have a great rest of your evening and weekend. I'll see you back here Tuesday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.